I'm Melissa Shanahan, and this is the Velocity Work Podcast, live episode number 126. All right. Welcome, everyone, to Velocity Work Live. So lucky to have a very special guest today, Seth Price. Seth, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, what a pleasure it is to be with you today and to have you here. Well, before we dig in too much, if people don't know who you are, I feel like they've been living under a rock, but do you want to share who you are and what you do?
In our small little bubble of a world, but
That's
sure.
True. That's true, but this is going out to our bubble.
Exactly. Sure. So my name is Seth Price. I am the managing partner of Price Benowitz, which is a multidisciplinary B2C firm. So PI, criminal, family, trust and estates, things like that. DC, Maryland, Virginia, and South Carolina. And in addition to my day job at Price Benowitz, I took my passion play, which was digital marketing. That's how we grew our firm from 2 to 40 lawyers over the last 10, 15 years. Took my in-house team about 7 years ago and created BluShark Digital, which went from a nominal side hustle to sort of one of the top couple names in SEO and digital marketing for B2C lawyers nationwide. So it's been a fun run, and I feel blessed. I sort of look at it like I have 2 teenage boys now, and we have a 7-year-old girl. We waited 5 years and rolled the dice for a girl, and I'm enjoying the 7-year-old so much because I know what it's not as cute later, and I feel like the mistakes that I made with 1 and 2, I'm trying not to make with number 3. And I feel like very similarly, running a law firm, which has lots of bells and whistles, ethical concerns, et cetera, that I've been able, as starting a second business, to sort of say, hey, what are some of the things that I wish that you could do differently when you start fresh? And that's been a pretty cool ride at BluShark.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm excited to dig in on just how you think and how you operate, because you have a level of experience that is different than anyone else we've had on the show. The scale of your business is bigger than probably anyone else we've had on the show. And with that comes different answers to some of the same questions. So if you could take us back to, what year did you start the law firm?
It depends how you count.
Okay.
Meaning, 07, 08 started to scale 09.
Okay. And then when did you start BluShark?
BluShark's about 7 years ago.
Okay. All right. So with the firm, was the firm your first business?
Yes and no. I left big law in DC to make my millions during the first .com bubble, and worked with a bunch of companies and was a founding employee of something called uslaw.com. That was a precursor to LegalZoom, FindLaw, et cetera.
Wow.
We had raised 10 million, had 40 million on the table. April of 2000 comes, the bubble bursts. By January of 2001, everything's gone. And so I had the entrepreneurial bug taste, helped launch a business using custom compilation CDs with a fraternity brother, which was essentially, before you could stream or download, we would burn a CD with songs on it and mail it to you. Napster came out with free downloads, and our business model was toast. And so I had the entrepreneurial bug and had talked to my law partner, Dave Benowitz, who went to college and law school together. We had dabbled in real estate. We built some apartment buildings, mini storage, tried a bunch of things, and didn't know what we wanted to do. And he really wanted to practice law, and I didn't. So we decided to divide and conquer. I would work on building the business, the operations, the marketing, et cetera, and he would be the chief legal officer. And for 2 schmucks sitting in his basement, this sounded very grandiose. But I think that divide and conquer has been the secret to our success, in that, I speak to so many people, and you have clients in the greater Max Law community and other communities out there, where people are like, how do I do both? And I don't always have a good answer to that. Like, it's very hard to wear a marketing hat and a substance hat. There are people that do it, or if you get to a level of prominence where the people come because of your substance, that's great. But playing the digital game, I was very blessed to be able to work on the incremental growth of the firm. Early days, I'm the one placing the Craigslist ads when that worked, answering the calls, making phone calls out from 7 to 9:30 at night. My attitude was, if I called somebody at 9 o'clock at night and they said, "Why are you bothering me?" it wasn't the right employee. So there was a lot of sweat equity that went in that if I had to be in court all day, I never could have done in scaling and building the law firm.
Right, right. Okay, I have more questions there that I want to ask, but I want to keep going with the question I had in mind to ask next was, share, if you can, your experience lifting the firm off the ground. Because I mean, you kind of have already started talking about it, because you were responsible for a specific role in the company and your partner was the lawyer, lawyering. And so when you think back to what it took to lift the company off the ground, some of it's what you just said, like hustling, sweat equity to lift it. Is there anything notable from that period where, looking back, you could see like young Seth was doing it, but it's just what you do. You kind of rise to the occasion when you're in it, right? If you have it in you. So I don't know, you want to share about that experience?
Look, it was the phone rings, it goes to the bat phone. It was my cell phone.
Yeah.
It was me. It was tied at the hip. I was getting dressed for date night with my wife for a wedding we were going to, in my closet, literally, like talking to a prospective client. It was, every call was gold. And eventually I handed the bat phone to one person, and he built it to eventually 3 people, that built it to a 5-person team, that built it to a today 13 to 15-person team. And then each of these pieces, but it's the fundamentals. It's like figuring out, again, mentors like a John Morgan are like, we're plumbers, we're not lawyers. When the hot water heater in your basement explodes, somebody's going to call to get that resolved. And the first person who answers the phone that they can find, who answers the phone, who sounds like they're going to be able to take care of this at a reasonable price, is going to get the business. And using that philosophy of retail for this B2C space, I'm in DC. There are plenty of people that just go and work their way through as a clog in the wheel of these, big law firms, and they can make a 7-figure living over time if they get lucky and make the right breaks and make the right connections to have some cases. You could do really, really well. I wanted to be able to control my own destiny, and like the idea that we were building something. And look, those years I mentioned, 08, 09, they were brutal. The economy was not in good shape. The real estate correction was there. And that, I'd say that you making lemonade out of lemons, we were able to hire people that would have been really, people who are still with us 11, 12 years later. We were able to get in with people when they had no options. And we had to continue to give them opportunity as that went on. But it's figuring out, like right now, it's the opposite. Right now, the economy is so tight. It's so hard to hire. You figure out what is it that you are, where's your competitive advantage? And right then there was more talent than there was cases. I worked on getting the phone to ring so that we could employ these people that were desperate for jobs.
Okay. Yeah. Did you ever have a thought when you were lifting off the ground, like, what am I doing? Or no, it was never that. It was
a combination of stuff. You needed to make a living. My relationship turned out to be marriage and kids was starting. It was sort of like, I believe as an entrepreneur, you go with your head down. And that can cut 2 ways. You can spend way too much time on a project or on something that's not going anywhere. But I think to do it, there's a certain amount of put your head down and drive. And that you see, if anything, the great entrepreneurs sometimes waste, but spend lots of time on something. Where even though, so when custom compilation CDs really weren't going to be going anywhere, it's very hard to say, you know what, I just scrapped everything. I was working out of my parents' living room, having to get out of the way of them as they're living their lives, trying to get this off the ground. And all of a sudden I'm like, you know what, that's all done. That's a tough place to be. So I was like, I felt it was a combination of, we had rapid early success that always helps. And that allowed me to sort of continue on this path in a really positive way.
Yeah. You strike me as the kind of person that it wasn't going to be any other way. You were always going to be doing what you're doing in terms of entrepreneurship. There are many people.
I thought I wasn't doing law. I was sort of forced back into this because this buddy, we went to UPenn together, took the same year off. He went to the public defender after law school that we were in together. And that he, I wanted an option to start a business. This was the business I just fell into.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but I guess when I say it wouldn't happen any other way, meaning you were always going to be your own man, right? And build something, no matter what this is the shape that it took. And
that was destined, having seen what it was like instead of big law was just not for me. Every time I moved for a period before I left onto the transactional side, and the work itself seemed mind-numbing to me, putting together employment stock option plans. It was necessary evil. It was part of the game. It's what people were paying for. But I loved what these companies were doing. Guys doing a roll-up of Great Plains software. Another guy who was just a serial entrepreneur, always coming up with different cool things. A fiber network at Wake Forest University. These were like, to me, I was like, I want to be them, not doing what I'm doing. But I felt like I wanted to get the skills and the sort of the check the box of being a lawyer, which was valuable and sort of like part of the journey. Everything you do leads to where you become. So even if something doesn't work out, 2.5 years at Big Law, helped give me perspective and insight to what we ended up building at Price Benowitz, seeing what we didn't want to do. And every time, I'll just be a funny sort of footnote that you hear in every business, right? Every one of your clients has this. You probably, as you grow your consulting, if you're an employee, it's not the way it used to be. You hear it. And I sort of laugh because, I've been inside the belly of the beast. I've done everything I can not to be that beast. But as you grow and you have people working together, there are certain things that take on certain truisms of law firm or businesses in general. And that there's mid-level management. One of the things we could dive into for an entire hour, I'm sure, is as you're building, you look at profitability. You mentioned before we went on air, 3 stages. And that when you're at that first stage where it's just you, highly profitable, not a lot of bells and whistles, maybe even an assistant or two, but it could be very profitable. That leap from 1 to that mid-level where all of these people are coming on board, at first it's like, I'll analogize it to real estate. If you buy a unit and it's next door to you, you can manage it. If there's a problem, you go over and fix it. If you buy a 4-plex, you can still do that. If you have 20 units, you can't anymore give a day job. You need a person. You need a person to show the places when they're empty. You need a person who's going to go do the repairs. All of that has to be there. And then as there's more people doing it, then you need somebody to manage those people. So sweat equity can get you managing the first guy. But when you have 4 people, all of a sudden you need a manager. And so when you're thinking about your pro formas and your costs, whether it be investment real estate or whether it be a law firm, to have 1 paralegal, they report directly to you. But to have 4 paralegals, you don't want to have 4 direct reports of those plus your accountant plus your off. Like you need that person funneling somewhere, and all of a sudden that salary, let's say use $50,000, is not just a salary, but it's $65,000 for a person to manage those 4. Yes. So all of a sudden that 50 is really almost 60 for each of those people, or more, maybe 65, in order to account for the fact that they need a manager of them in order just to survive and not allow you to have endless direct reports.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, I love that you just said that. I haven't necessarily thought of it in the way that you said that, but I'm hoping that people who are listening, that just unlocks something, because it isn't just about that next hire and then the next hire. You have to think, a level or 2 above that. Like, what are you going to need if you hire this person?
Well, right. And that the cost is not 1. There's early profitability. It's unreplicable. You have 1 unit that you're renting next door to you, where you can go over and show the apartment at night yourself. You can oversee repairs. It's as profitable as 1 unit. If you have 20, it won't be there. Franchise, same thing. Somebody owns 1 Subway. They're working there in their job. It's sweat equity. They do it. But as you open more and more, and somebody has to, now you have to pay for the person to be there as a gentleman. Then you need somebody to check on all of them. That pyramid. Now, with 10, there's a lot more revenue that can pay for this, and it's a scalable piece. But the early piece of scaling, When, let's say, you're starting to scale and you don't have a full 10, let's say there are 10 of anything, whether it be apartments, franchises, or staff members at your firm, great. Now you can afford a manager for them. But what happens at 5, 6, 7 when you're in that netherworld? Are you going to make up for that with sweat equity and do it yourself, even though it may not be your skill set? Are you going to bring somebody on knowing that you probably don't even know what you need yet? So the person coming on maybe not set up for success. There's a lot of back and forth there. And that knowing that the pro forma of profitability per person is going to go down from when you have 1, when you have 10, knowing you need those redundancies. Some point they want you to have an HR person. You got to do this. You're moving from over time from a small plan to a large plan. Each of the insurance-wise, each of those things comes with costs, which means margins shrink. And if you're not careful about it, it can be problematic. And especially, I'll divide the worlds. The PI world, which has the potential for massive verdicts, has the ability to hit certain multiples of revenue. But when you're doing stuff in the immigration world, in the criminal world, I scale criminal beyond most people to 20 lawyers. When you do these things, there are costs associated with it, which will bring down, your net margin, your ROI, and that it's just a thing. But if you don't anticipate that, you're going to be sadly hit when you see what those additional costs are to remain at scale.
Yeah, absolutely. If you were going to start another business tomorrow, which maybe you are, how would you think about that now with that middle zone where it's like, you don't need 10 yet, but you're in the mid, like you need 5, 6 people. Would you just, at this point, is it important to you to have the capital to get what you need because you understand where this is all going to land, or
I've never done it that way, so I don't know. And Jay and I just talked about this on Max Growth Live today. Price Benowitz was not capitalized. I would say the best that BluShark was that it was incubated in another organization. So it had the equivalent of my parents' living room. It had a basement to be developed in. It had a client. It basically could, grow more naturally rather than, hey, we're starting today. And depending on how independent something is, if it's part of your life, like a limb being, grown out of you, it's much easier in some respects and doesn't need the capitalization than if you're saying, oh, I really don't have any resources. I'm starting let's say an employment business. I'm going to start being a recruiter for lawyers. And you need a place, you need a staff, you need everything. It's great when you can incubate it inside something else or in your basement. That's why a lot of the great businesses started in somebody's garage. You need like a place and a pad, less and less so with the virtual world, which gives you certain options, different challenges. It's like once you start to see stuff, it can be good and bad. The one thing is you've done it. But the bad thing is you sort of know how hard it is.
Yeah.
And, and that it sometimes takes a pause before you realize there are costs to everything.
Yeah.
And some of it pre-COVID, law firm was cranking, all of a sudden brakes are on, and the law firm had lots of issues during COVID on every level. And the marketing agency seemed to BluShark went naturally virtual. The millennials didn't want to come to work, which turned out to be a boon, I think, for future growth and development. But it was much more natural, and demand spiked as all the eyeballs were online. And so that was sort of like a huge benefit that I saw, but that I needed to jump back into the law firm more and stabilize that, because there was no roadmap, to sort of think back to the future. There is no, road where we're going. And so what do we do? We've never seen the world shut down overnight. That was really scary. And that takes more sweat equity to navigate, because that needs your brain power rather than somebody who's put in place to manage. That person may or may not have the ability to audible. We had a situation where a senior person at the firm made the call when the world closed down on that Thursday. Oh, no, don't worry. We'll be fine. Everybody will be here Monday. My friends at other firms are doing that. I'm like, no, And so it's like, there would be if we had forced people to go to work on a day that the entire world closed down, that could have been irreparable damage. So
Mhm.
the idea that you're still involved, along the way, until you have checks and balances and things like that, it's hard to pull yourself fully out in those respects.
Yeah. Yeah. My gosh, I feel like there's so many directions I want to go. Well, okay. Well, I do want to understand a little bit more. Let's just say you were starting a business tomorrow, and you're not going to fund it, right? Like it's going to need to, for the most part, grow, like be lean and grow and be profitable, so that you can continue to grow. My question is, when you do hit that, where you're not just you and an assistant, but you're not yet to that where all cylinders are running with 10 people and it's all dialed in. So I guess what I'm hearing you say is you would know and expect to put in the sweat equity in that middle phase.
Assume you don't have, I mean, depends on a lot of things. All questions.
Yes.
Depends. But generally, yeah, you may not be taking a salary, or if it is, it's be nominal. You may be, if you have a partner, you're sort of saying, hey, we're playing the long game here. We're not going to make something short term, or very little short term.
Mm-hmm.
And that it's, once, when you move from one to the next, it depends on how quickly revenue grows. I saw this period of the dot-com bubble where there was no revenue, it was all venture funding. And it really depends on what your game is.
Yeah.
There are certain areas that make money from day one, and it's awesome, and everybody high fives. There are certain ones where, I could speak to BluShark, that there was like a 2-year period after we launched. We had crushed it with Price Benowitz. Anybody who searches for anything in DC, Maryland, Virginia, or now South Carolina, but for PI in DC, Maryland, Virginia, for criminal, DC, Maryland, Virginia, South Carolina, we have 1-packs coming up for certain things in criminal and trust and estates. We dominate. So people are like, okay, great. But there was a certain number of people like, yeah, I see what you're doing. Great. I want in. And a certain piece of the market said, that's great. Can you do it for somebody else? And there was sort of like a lull where it was going. And then all of a sudden, once there was sort of a proof of concept that there were people other than you that could testify or justify it, that became our bellwether to survive those 2 years. And all of a sudden, it was hockey stick growth. And that we've just seen a second one come, where sort of a second bump came, where, and this happened during COVID and has continued, where people said, okay, we look at the market. A lot of the sort of fly-by-night guys are disappearing or much less visible. You're now one of the top 3 choices in the market. And at that point, it's really about, and to me, I'm sort of jumping from 2 to 3, phase 2 to phase 3, which is, I need to make sure that this is scaling well, because so many people, particularly in digital marketing and anything, if you scale your coaching, you have 10 coaches, that means you have a 10th worst coach on your team. And so as we did that, if we have 8 people in charge of links, that means there's an 8th worst person with a portfolio of clients. And I need to make sure that everything we're doing is building and growing, because it's not magic, it's not fair. It's human beings being managed and with a culture that allows for development. You can't just throw people in. And I just had a phone call today with somebody where they were like, hey, yeah, this person, they're doing okay. They had a lot of problems. They were being sort of problematic with their managers, but we don't want to lose them because it might upset the apple cart with other people. And so there are all these pieces. I'm talking about a lot of things, but bottom line is that shift from 2 to 3, and I know you wanted to focus on 2, is can your systems support the growth in a manageable, smart way that doesn't hurt the clients, that clients aren't coming saying, it's not the way it used to be. I want to be able to provide rock star attention to everybody. And the only way that works is with great systems and scale. That I think graduation from 2 to 3, during 2, or the middle ground of growth, you're no longer the solo, but as you do that, the question is, can you get your teams in place? That the secret for growth is adding more labor. And mutual friend of ours, Ryan McKean, he has 18 people wanting to grow to 30. And like, he sees it. He has the org chart, I'm sure, filled out, and he just needs to get those butts in seats quickly. with
Mm-hmm.
quality, and he knows that he's there. He can see the future. He has the marketing coming in. It's
Yeah.
all running together. So you see a person who, let's say, arguably is in that mid stage. You can look right over the horizon and see the large stage. Now the question is staffing. And if the real question is for somebody, using Ryan as our case study here, to get from mid-level to large and sustainable long-term, you need those 12 people, maybe a couple managers he's not even thinking about right now. So to me, as the entrepreneur, he still has a full caseload, but what I did is I started, and I mentioned at the top of the show, I'm now in Craigslist, then now it's Indeed or LinkedIn. I'm literally, that's my job, because I can't find somebody good enough. And my sort of taking you back to my mid-level, literally, to answer your question, mid-level, I knew that I needed bodies in place to scale the law firm, and that not dissimilar at points to the BluShark, but I'll tell you about that in a second. But that what I did was, my job was, I had somebody placing the ads, got the ads in, I personally would screen them. I would, interview them myself in those late hours, and the next step was literally through Craigslist, found a lady, turned out to be crazy, but got me to the next point. She would do the screening of the people. She would meet them at Starbucks at 7th and H for an in-person. If they passed her reality check, she sent them down to Starbucks at 7th and E, where I was sitting.
Oh,
I
wow.
would then meet them, and if I liked them, I walked them back up to the law firm.
Oh, I
That
love
was
that.
sort of that middle hustle to get that firm scaled.
Yeah.
And if we hadn't done that, we would never have gotten ourselves, arguably, not, from that middle to, let's say, the bottom of the top of the third tier. Interesting enough, at BluShark, it was a very different process, which was, you had your early employees, but I was not able to hire my way with expertise. I couldn't find a PI lawyer or a criminal lawyer with talent, which is my predilection. There, we couldn't find talent, period. National search. If you said today, Melissa, I'm starting an SEO division for Velocity Works, it's not like you can put an ad out and find anybody who knows anything about SEO. In my market, I would get the person from AARP who had been there for 15 years. They were given the SEO title. They didn't know squat. People wanted 100, 125 or more per year with no real meaningful SEO knowledge. So we said, you know what? We know what we're doing. It's inside my head. And my partner, Brenton, who was our intern at the law firm, who's now president of BluShark, we knew what to do. We know how to do it, but we needed to scale. We started with the summer programs called a fellowship, and trained people over the summer, brought on 8, gave 6 offers, got 4. That was our internal growth, and which was allowed us to grow arguably from that mid-level to that larger point. And that it's and right now, what I came back to our ops director with, which is, if we want to continue to grow sustainably, and let's take the business development team that I have, if I want to get myself out of that role, which I'm more and more doing, that we need to sort of say, hey, instead of bringing on 10 fellows, let's bring on 15 and find 1 or 2 people that can be part of intake/sales or some other department. But that if you want to supersize, that you need to sort of continue to build and grow that funnel, or have the recruiting elsewhere. But if you don't get the labor, you can't, you're going to end up with clients that say your quality has dropped. And that's the one thing I just have spent every minute with BluShark trying to make sure it doesn't happen, that we continue, that even if you have the third best person, that the quality, because of the systems, is still at the point where you can't do better elsewhere.
On your journey of figuring out and implementing systems so that it improves things and the clients feel only positive as well, is there anything you've learned that you had to learn in order for that balance to be struck? Or not necessarily, it's just iterations of things?
Oh, no. I would say the things that I learn, and I can't say that I always do, but this is true whether you're a lawyer with clients or an SEO agency with law firm client, if you figure out who either isn't buying in as a client and or is so problematic that no matter the money being paid, it's not worth it. I told my people, particularly at BluShark. I probably should do more at Price Benowitz, even though I say it to both, which is if somebody is being an a-hole and it is hurting your ability to live and work and be happy, that we will take a shot at fixing it. But if it's not fixable, we are not going to live with it. And early on at BluShark, there was a $100,000 a year client who I had flown to a conference on the West Coast. I had spoken. This was the piece of business that came from it. It was awesome. And this guy was a complete a-hole to our top accounts person, Sabrina. And I told her, and I stand by this, I'm not losing you. And she's still with us as our senior accounts person. I'm not losing you. This person's being fired. And we went to them and said, in this case, it was the person's marketing person who was just abusive. I said, either you give us somebody other than this person or we can't work with you. And he's like, well, she's here and too bad. I'm like, fine. And I think that's true at law firms. I mean, again, if you have a $10 million case, you'll put up with a lot. But when you're dealing with a regular PI case, and it may be the easiest $5,000 or $10,000 your firm's going to make, or if it's a criminal one and it's like, that's a $15,000 felony. If they're abusing your staff and hurting your ability to keep and retain great talent, you have to let those people go. And if you don't, it's going to cost you a lot more in the long run. So that's what I have learned, which is, and I saw it with the law firm, but I think I've done a better job at BluShark, which is when there's an issue of somebody who's not buying in, being abusive, that the money is not worth it, and that I'd rather curtail that. And I think that's been a great reason for BluShark's success, is looking for partner clients, people that are true partners, that aren't like, here's a check, dance for me. It's here I have funds, but I'm treating this the way I would to my in-house team and working collaboratively and building and growing together. That works. The idea that I'm paying and expecting a result blindly never works.
Gosh, that's so good. It's fascinating to hear you talk about this. I've come to my own conclusions with this, with velocity work, where I've never heard it put like that. Here's a check, dance for me. There have been instances where it's like that. I'm thinking, this is a no. Like, this is just a no. You got to be all in just as much as I'm all in on your stuff. So, I love that.
Look, you have a great reputation. The times I've spent with you are like, I get it. I get what you can do for a law firm as a business, et cetera. And so but it's not fairy dust. If you want fairy dust, there are people that will sell that to you. What you're selling is closer to therapy than anything else. And that you don't go to a therapist and say, cure me. You go and you work on yourself, and they ask, like, half of it's inside of you. Most of the time, if you were to be honest about most of your clients, because I say that when people ask me for advice, it's literally the yellow brick road. It's inside of you the whole time. The question is, can somebody extract it? I look at like Nick Lason's one of my favorites. I think who've been in your world, and these are guys that they came and like showed up at a John Fisher event, like, oh my God, look at all these people that they're so awesome. Like, no, it's inside of you. The question is, can somebody else extract that out of you and get you to do this? And that's the opposite of dance for me. It's like, I'm going to do these things. Can you give me the ammunition, the tools, the experience, and the mistakes you've made to try to short circuit that, but allow me to take what is inside of me. Half of it is belief of what's inside of you, and half of it being able to then work together to get that out.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a flavor of desperation with the dance for me people. They're usually desperate and in a hurry to get a result that they expect you to get really quickly, and they don't understand the process. And I'm just thinking, for some law firms that may be very different. Like, your clients are going to be desperate, and that's why they're coming to you, period. Whereas a business like yours or like mine, the desperation is actually not, there's not a place for it here.
Correct. And like, it's there, you could be desperate, but it's not going to get you any further. I looking sort of introspectively, if we lose a client at BluShark, it is generally from some outside force saying, what's your ROI? What's your ROI? And that's not an illogical question, but like most things, the first 4 months of coaching, there may not be an ROI. You're building a foundation. Now you have to like, don't be stupid about it. If Velocity has never helped build and grow a law firm and there's nobody speaking up for it, then there would be a problem, but that's not the case. Same with BluShark. We have over, 200, close 250 happy clients that you should be at the point where you're like, you trust the process. We had this on the wall of our office pre-COVID. It has to be put back up. I think it is now at our new clubhouse, but trust the process. It's going to be rebuilding a website, building links, creating content. There may be 6 to 9 months with almost nothing. And if somebody's saying, where's the ROI? Where's the ROI? Well, that's not a bad question for a company to ask. And I'm not trying to poo-poo that. What I'm saying is, if you don't really understand the journey that you're on, same like here, my guess is there are people you have to break down before they can be built up, not like in a terrible way, but in a like, hey, your personality and way of leadership is toxic. If you want people to follow you as a herd, you're going to have to change that. And that's going to mean like, and it may mean the people you have with you aren't even on with you for the rest of the journey. So if somebody says to you where you are 4, 5, 6 months in, where's your ROI? It may not be a bottom line ROI because you're actually creating and building something. I think the analogy is there. Again, not to bury your head in the sand, and you have to know that you have bet on the right person. And that's what's so amazing in my digital space, the number of charlatans that are out there. And somebody always said, how are they going to differentiate you from them? I'm like, I feel like at this time we have enough success stories that it may not work for you. There could be, hey, you're in a hyper competitive market and the market, like the world keeps changing for whatever reason, it doesn't click. Fine. But like, it's not going to be for a lack of trying. And as long as you believe and understand the widget that you are buying, that's where it moves from dance for me to, okay, we're going to collaborate. We're going to find everything that's there. And when you do that, there are just awesome results that can happen.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned just a minute ago that trust the process is on the wall, or it was, maybe it will be again soon. Is one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, are there any philosophies or principles that kind of roll around in your mind that you tend to just abide by, like a quote or something else? I don't know. Is there anything that comes to mind when I ask that?
Truisms in my life, my business life, may not be answering your question, but I enjoy them, so I'll share them. So like, nothing's easy comes up a lot. Somebody gives notice, a role, everything's there, and it's just like, employees do crazy things. The outside forces do crazy things. Bar sanction issues, all sorts of stuff. Nothing's easy. So that's one truism. Trust the process is definitely one that we've lived and grown with on BluShark. There were a couple on the general business, having been both at digital marketing startups back in the day, through the law firm, through real estate, where we had a guy early on steal our $60,000 to $100,000 and put it into something he got scammed with, like crazy stuff you can't believe happened. So people suck. No good deed goes unpunished, and you can't teach common sense are the trio that will be the top of what book I write someday.
Okay.
The last piece on top of those three is that money solves almost any problem. There's some helpful ones that's tough. Even there, money can help. But I had a woman, she quit the other day. I couldn't have that happen. She was a paralegal for a key partner. We had some contraction in that office where we had lost a lawyer and a paralegal. So we were perfectly staffed. I didn't want to lose this person. And a $10,000 delta making her a manager and giving her much of what she wanted and deserved solved the problem. Angry clients, they're furious on the Price Benowitz side. How about $2,000 credit on your? Sure, they're the happiest person in the world. Money does solve a lot of problems. Now, if you throw money at everything, you're out of business and you're not profitable. But knowing that when stuff seems insurmountable, there's very often a dollar figure that will solve the problem.
I love talking about money. I'd be curious. You gave some truisms, generally speaking. Do you have any that have to do with money specific? I mean, money solves almost any problem. I totally agree with that. Yeah. How do you think about money?
My answer is probably shockingly naive.
Okay.
And that, I mean, in the sense that I put my head down to make it. I have found that I don't like to be successful. There's so many things you could have in the air, and that I try not to think of things that way. My law partner, Dave Benowitz, has taught me a lot in that one thing that he sort of instilled in me is that when you hire somebody, I think this is a great lesson. We don't look at a pro forma like, oh, this is a $50,000 employee. Take somebody who's starting out. It's a that rather it is $25,000 for 6 months or $125,000 for 3 months. Now, it can be dangerous because they're there and you then have that obligation, assuming you don't fire them, which is very hard to do. But if you look at it like, okay, in 3 months, I don't need this person right now, but I have the excess bandwidth, which will get me to the next level. If somebody quits, they're there for $12,500, I can take that leap. That's a lot less scary than $50,000 for the next 3 years. It's $150,000 because the person's not staying if they can't justify their existence. But I mean, to my credit and dismay with Price Benowitz, we have grown because I haven't gone the Lee Rosen route of let me get a contractor for that. It's like, no, I want to own somebody who's doing it. That works really well in some places, harder as you scale because then you have to monitor their work within a team, within that pyramid, and you need a person to do that. That's more expense. But I have believed if another person makes you money, I want to hire them. And that has been so. I think that sort of to answer your question, it was like not looking at things for a long term because you'll scare yourself out of anything. You can pro forma yourself just out of deciding to do anything you want to do because you can make it scary enough, whether it be a real estate investment or whether it be hiring a person at a law firm or adding a new expense in the marketing company. But it's being realistic, not looking at worst case scenario, not looking at best, but saying, okay, what, you're planning a wedding, you could drive yourself crazy saying I'm inviting 250 people and the room only holds 180. And you'd be like, I can't do that. And you're like, no, you sit down and you say, I did this myself for my own wedding. These people are definitely coming. These people are 75, these are 50, and these people know. And you can put people in categories, almost like a pollster does to figure out election certainties. And you can then do this. No different from these different buckets of expense or otherwise, and figuring out and planning, knowing that it's not going to be the best case scenario because you don't want to budget for that. But if you budget for worst case scenario, you'll never get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, so true. Do you, how intense is planning for you? Or maybe someone else, maybe it's someone else's job on the team, like to really own that. But how much planning do you guys do? And is it different for BluShark versus Price Benowitz when you think like forward the next year or more?
Right. So to a certain extent, I've always been a combination of making sure your systems are in place to execute on what you have, and then think about the areas you want to go into, and also looking for serendipity of things that would take you in a new direction. I knew I wanted to go to family law. We interviewed for years to find somebody to build out that division. Not easy. We had people in one state that didn't work out. We've had one person, knock on wood, that's kicking ass and developing the Maryland practice. Other things fall into your lap. We wanted to expand, but somebody listening to Max Growth Live, this amazing lawyer named Dane Phillips, cold called me out of the blue and said, hey, I love what you're doing. I want in. I'm like, you're in South Carolina, whatever. We flew him up. He now is the partner running our South Carolina operations, one of the most decent, hardworking, amazing lawyers you're going to meet. And we have built, he went from $50,000 a year where the paychecks weren't clearing to paying off law school debt in the next year. Really a remarkable. So I think it's a combination of knowing where you want to be, but also looking for opportunities that may be out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I just thought to say this in case for listeners, earlier Seth was like in it deep and was awesome talking about tier 2, tier 3. And before it aired, I shared with Seth this the concept of simple grace, the unfortunate middle, and complex grace, which I've shared on the podcast and I've shared here. If someone doesn't know about that, you can go find the podcast called The Unfortunate Middle, and it explains it. But that's what I think you were referring to, tier 2, tier 3.
It's safe going with this because it's just beginning, middle, not end, but advanced. Beginning, intermediate, advanced. Whether it be swimming in camp or anything else, you have those. And just because you're advanced doesn't mean that like you're an Olympic swimmer. It just means that you're no longer in the point where you're refining certain things and you can now sort of be on your own in the pool. And to those steps, it's like, are you in the deep end yet? And there's a point when you sort of are, in the shallow with the kickboard. There's the point where you like are there with supervision, and then there's the point when you're really on your own. And I feel like those truisms, depending, different ways of phrasing it, but we all sort of feel it at different levels.
Yeah.
And to be completely introspective, it's not like, depending on where you put your mark, I could put myself at the beginning parts compared to certain people out there. I could solidly be in the middle, and I could be advanced. I was just invited to speak at a conference, and they wanted to put me on the panel with some of my mentors that are 17 steps ahead of me with as far as systems planning and growth. And I'm like, whoa, I can't. And they're like, you should be there. And I'm like, I don't think I should be there. But they're like, no, you should be there. And it's kind of, I think there's a certain amount of life in business, fake it till you make it. And there's a certain amount that, you being humble enough to know where you are, that you still have a lot to learn and grow. And I think it's the balance of the two. And you need both in both at different times. If you don't have the gumption to say, I'm going to be there, you're not going to get there. But if you think you're there before you get there, you're going to come off as a poser and really not do well with internal culture, people, and growth.
Well, okay. So as you're talking about the advanced, I like the way that you're framing this too, kind of parallel next to simple grace, complex grace, and then there's the unfortunate middle. And you're saying sort of intermediate, advanced. But in my mind, complex grace to me speaks to freedom for the founders and for the owners, the people who lifted it off the ground, that sense of freedom. To your point, there's times where that freedom isn't 100% of the time. You may have to step back in.
IBM, the head guy, isn't there until his top deputy is caught at a January 6th insurrection. You know what I mean? Like you're only as good. Southwest, you think the CEO of Southwest can do whatever he wants until the pilots start walking off over vaccine mandates. And you're like, if that decision is going to be made, you could have a crisis management team, but your name and legacy is going on this decision. Are you backing down? Are you going to pretend that this is a weather thing? Or what are you going to do?
Right.
So I think that at some level, you're always there. You may get yourself out of day-to-day grind when the systems are really there. But it is, and that the more that you do that, and I can use BluShark as my best case study. I have realized, I've had the introspection, both myself and the team forcing this, that I should not be speaking to frontline millennial or now Gen Z workers. That if somebody is in that 21 to 25 category, which is a lot of our employment force, not all of it, but a good number, that when I open my mouth, their father is yelling at them. I could say, hey, have you ever thought of doing it this way? And all of a sudden, all their childhood drama and trauma is brought up in that moment. I generally, unless it's a social cocktail scene, unless it's my biz dev team, do not deal with anybody below a manager level, which frankly is probably the right way to go. We had somebody exiting not too long ago who was like an unhappy camper. And the fact is, I don't even know what's going on. I had met them at social parties and loved them. Apparently, friction had changed, but the idea that I'm there to advise and consult and jump in, but I'm not dealing with that day to day. I'm there to sort of work on, through, e-myth type elements, which is what are easier to do outside of law than in law. I truly believe that e-mything, we had Michael Gerber on Max Growth Live. It was an amazing episode if you haven't seen it. That said, and I didn't push him on there, we pushed more off camera, but he's like, you e-myth 100% or not. I'm like, the only way you e-myth 100% in law is to be LegalZoom. Otherwise, people are buying that expertise. And by definition, you can't e-myth that. You're asking for the original thought of a human being, which is why you're getting $500 an hour plus, not a legal form for $7.99 that you're using a SaaS-based model for. I love the e-myth. Would love, but that's not generally the lot in life we choose as a law firm for the most part. You can continue to build systems and you can continue to grow and develop things, but there's a point where people are paying for that individualized expertise. BluShark, on the other hand, I've had a much easier time with the idea that there is a team in place. They are doing their jobs. It's not 100% e-myth. People are thinking of creative ways to build links or organize content or come up with these things. But the idea that there is that pyramid and that there's somebody at the top who thankfully is not me, and it's as good as that person. So it's incentivizing, providing equity if needed, pay, whatever it is to bring those people in, find your key people, and then build around that. There's always that contingency for plan B, like at the law firm, when somebody fell off a motorcycle, that can change your trajectory in a minute. That said, when it's in place and you have that there, I can come in for tweaking. Like, our HR guy, there was an issue of an unhappy employee, and there were certain issues that were out there that would make this person problematic potentially to let go. And he says, well, you can't let somebody go. This has been told to me at the law firm, and everything has a price. It's not like it's infinite. It's not like somebody can sue you for $20 million. It's like, it's going to cost X amount as a nuisance suit or X amount as severance. And at the end of the day, unless you get really, really unlucky, you're going to have a price to it. And to me, that's where the entrepreneur comes in and says, okay, my lawyer is telling me this, but realistically, there's no liability there. And yes, they're telling me that, let's put this out, 2 out of 100 times there could be a really bad problem. But but that you're self-insuring it, but you can't be held captive. And you're sort of, in each instance, you're figuring out which of these different things are there. And only you could be the person. My entire team, which is amazing at BluShark, is listening to the employment lawyer as gospel, saying, we can't do X, Y, or Z. And it would take you to come in and say, no, we'll take that risk or not, but it's not black and white. And that's one that's their job to be conservative. But again, as one of my ethics lawyers once told me, if you thought about all the risk that's involved in everything we do, you wouldn't get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
And that comes back to, being willing, you're balancing somebody who's, maybe not performing versus how that's going to upset the apple cart of other employees versus maybe you would help. Sometimes when somebody's let go and people realize a job is not a God-given right, all of a sudden you see increased productivity. So it's balancing all of those different things, listening to your lieutenants on the ground, and then making collaborative decision. And if anything, if I conclude with this, one of the growing pains I've seen on the digital side is that the management team is younger than I am. They're truly millennials as opposed to Gen Zers that are the new employees. And one of the things that I found frustrating is my way of doing this is a talk out. If you and I we would talk something through, think of the pros and cons, and come to it, and it does a miraculous stuff. The millennial team wants to text it out, and to me, it's not nearly as good. You do that, there's an entire group of people that are running fabulously successful organizations with culture. I don't want to speak for you, but are beyond what I could create. They have a finger on the pulse of that culture, but there is a certain amount of pull and tug of not wanting to talk things out on the phone, which is how I've gotten where I am. So I've tried to accommodate as best I can and move to that. And I see myself now with certain older people in the business who want to call and tell me things. And I'm like, I know what they're going to tell me. Can you just text it? Versus the serendipity and the nuance that comes from the discussion. That's been a real interesting thing as we built and grown, trying to take it full advantage of the benefit of somebody connected to the Gen Z team, but understanding it comes with a cost that they don't think the same way I do. And there's got to be sort of bending in the middle that has allowed us to persevere the way we have.
Wow. Do you you mentioned HR a few times, and this got me thinking, this, firms that I work with, there's a debate, a bit of a debate about when to hire for HR. When do you do that? When do you stop?
I'm the wrong person to ask, because I would kick the can as long as possible, which is not the book. It's probably not the right answer. Like, I want an ops person that handles HR. To me, HR is a cost center. Now, I don't want to get sued. I want to make sure I'm checking boxes.
Right.
Hire ADP or whoever the local equivalent is that you love.
Yeah. Outsource
what you can. I'm not saying outsource the full service, like they need a concierge person. They'll pick again, I'm talking very flippantly. They'll pick their insurance. If there's a problem, push it back to the insurance people. That's what they're paid for. They get their commission. But you need HR when it comes to hiring and firing, and you want to make sure that you're not negligent there. But the idea, literally, I should have at arguably both organizations more quote unquote HR. I'm not the touchy feely type. I'd rather see that money put in a stronger ops person that covers HR. Ironically, at Price Benowitz, part of our overseas build out that's been pretty darn successful is we have somebody, and the problem that I've always had, we're in DC. DC isn't cheap. It's not New York. It's not San Francisco, but it's not cheap. And that recent college grads are now commanding 50K. You know, bad day 45, good day 55, but they're not coming in at 30 or 35 the way they used to. Minimum wage is at 15. You go to McDonald's and make 30, right? So like Starbucks, you make 30 with health benefits. So we're now at a point where the world has moved up, which means mid-level managers, not your top person. Hopefully your senior person over time. And again, this is not for a solo, but if you want to keep that great ops person, you need a path to 6 figures for all my people. I know that otherwise you're eventually going to lose them.
Yeah.
And if you want to not lose, so what happens with that number 2 person? You have an ops person. My feeling is invest in them, and as long as you can, bring in elements. I call Lee Rosen style, meaning contractors, pieces, whatever it is. Don't have a second major nut for as long as you can.
Yeah.
Look, some people would say you're missing it, that this will keep culture greater, you'll keep more. Maybe. I mean, there are different ways to slice it. But again, I would like to say, hey, put as much into culture from the top as you can. You know, I don't think anybody's going to replace Ryan McKean, one of my favorites out there. He's going to set a tone and culture. Put your money into an ops guy so you don't need to be there. Outsource the HR stuff for as long as you can. And again, my Band-Aid, I have a consultant report that says I need a second HR person. I brought somebody in from overseas who's amazing. And I'm not left with that, let's say, old school $60,000 to $80,000 mid-tier HR person who's not going to be happy, not making money. And when a recent college grad's next job is at that 60, I'm not retaining anybody decent. That's my problem. Is that I'm in this awful netherworld. And so the question is, I say it tongue in cheek. I'd like, without getting sued majorly, I'd like people to basically consolidate into your ops for as long as possible, because to me, unless you feel that you aren't, let's say you're not a board leader and you need somebody culturally to do things, great. But essentially the HR person is both for the employee satisfaction and prevent from getting sued. I'm like, look, we're a law firm. We're not going to get sued a lot. I don't think we've had one demand letter in 15 years that ended up getting somebody 2 weeks more severance. We don't deal with a lot of litigation. You know, let's figure this out. And just see what we're dealing with.
Yeah. There's another question that hit my brain that I just want to poke and see what comes out of it. We're talking about money and how you think about money. And I'm wondering, way back when, like, has money always felt pretty easy? Not easy, like you don't have to work hard, but it's not an enigma to you. Like, money it's math. Does that feel like money is easy to create?
Within reason. I mean, and history is written by the victor. It's been today. I'm humble enough to know that it could disappear tomorrow.
Sure.
Right? We saw during COVID, criminal law, we're the largest criminal player in the state.
But if it did disappear tomorrow, you could do it again.
Well, and I'd figure something out.
Yeah.
I don't know what, but we'd figure something out.
Right.
You know, a lot of people, like a lot of these podcasts, why I love this conversation is it's answering me. A lot of these people, and when I go to speeches and you hear the Tony Robbins, there's a story. I was destitute, I was a drug addict. I never had that. I feel like this comedian who's viral online who talks about she was like, she dropped out of college and she's like an attractive, upper middle class blonde woman. And she's like, yeah, there were a lot of options, a lot of things that could have happened. All of them were fine. Like, I don't want to bemoan this. Like, I've had non-successful moments in real estate where we, note to self, Baltimore real estate, not an ideal place to invest. But the thought that I was raised in an upper middle class family in Manhattan, I've had a good structured family. I know that if everything went wrong, and I did this when I started my .com at 28, I'd go live at home and have the Tropicana waiting in the fridge, and dry cleaning would be taken care of, and laundry would be done. And that I have a certain safety net. And maybe if I didn't have that, I'd have more of a drive and I'd be even more successful. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I have a hard time when there's the why. I haven't been abused. I haven't been an alcoholic. Like, there are a lot of things that drive people that are there.
Yeah.
Me, I'm like, I enjoy it. It's a puzzle. I like doing it. And I've found success moving the needle in a bunch of different areas.
Yeah.
For the first .com bubble, when we were doing Easy CD, we had nothing. We rented a cheap space. We sat on egg cartons, those plasticky things. We learned all of a sudden the major labels didn't want to license their music to us. What do? You're left with independent music, rap, and jazz. I don't know rap at all, but I knew that we needed that music. I cold called and made friends with the guy from Rap Sheet magazine. He invited me to speak at his conference in Atlanta on a panel about digital. I was the digital expert.
Wow.
You create your own opportunities. You'd find a way. Dougie Fresh is still on my speed dial to this day. Chuck D was like a quote unquote friend back in the day. Professor Griff called me his favorite Jew. I mean,
what?
I worked my way into a circle. Like, if there's drive and to me, it's a puzzle. It's like, okay, music, relationships are what's there. My job is to build that relationship. And it can't be fake. I didn't go in saying, I love your music. I didn't know his music. I didn't like the music, but I was like, I loved what I was doing and being genuine. I think one of the images that was, Flavor Flav at a digital conference is sitting holding a Big Mac in one hand, eating with his clock, and I'm explaining to him how to use a search engine. I mean, like,
you can't make this stuff up.
Exactly. So again, I don't ever told the story, but like, these are things that, like, you see obstacles, you find ways around them, and you create it. And knowing, what there are bigger players than me in music that had figured this out. The big label started licensing. You either get yourself in, and if I were to sort of critique, then it was less networking on the exit side than it was the substantive side. Again, good or bad, putting the head down and saying, we're going to become, and it's not all glorious. There's a guy who reached out, who claimed to have the rights to a bunch of music that was on the bubble of independent and mainstream. Like, oh my God, 34th Street in Manhattan, doorman building. I go upstairs and he's running something that I still to this day don't know. It looks somewhere between a brothel and his harem in this apartment with sheets dividing rooms of different people living in them. And he's sitting there with a catalog of music. I still to this day have no idea what's real and not. I assume not. But like, it was enough that you're chasing down every lead, you're hustling, you're trying to make this stuff happen. So, I've seen how difficult it is to make something from nothing. In the legal space, short of Arizona opening up the floodgates, we have a protected space. And even if we're not the best in business, and even if there's a John Morgan out there, we still are in a position where we are left with a relatively protected space for the moment. And while that's there, you have certain advantages that you aren't working against Fortune 500 companies for the moment, and that you have the ability to build your regional practice. Again, eyes wide open. I'm looking at what's happening, in Arizona, in Utah. DC's had this, but at some point the floodgates will open, and this is going to be a very, very different landscape. But for the moment, we have this protected universe. Whereas when I go on the digital side, anybody raises their hand could say they're the best SEO person in the world. They've never been in business before. They have fake reviews. There's no bar that's going to come down on them. It's the market, and the market isn't connected. So you're constantly getting battled where, while somebody could battle you in your little market, it's very upsetting. It's not the same as random people in Fort Lauderdale who have reinvented themselves for the third time and said, I'm trying to take you down.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you know, I love hip hop and jazz.
I did not know that.
I don't know if you can see that. I don't even know. That's Notorious B.I.G. and this is RBG. So it's my king and queen on the wall.
So I'll give you two personal stories. My mom
Okay.
was in a camp bunk at Camp Shinawa back in the day, where the tennis counselor who slept in her bunk was Kiki, RBG.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, she was the tennis. She was the tennis instructor there.
Wow.
Yeah, and so
Huh.
I smile when I hear that story, and that I was just talking about this the other night. That one of the few true crossovers between jazz and mainstream, arguably, could be Nora Jones. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was a middle school buddy who I've lost touch with, who was the most amazing guy, Jesse Harris of the Ferdinands,
Hmm.
who instead of taking a meeting from some creepy guy with dubious people living in his apartment, took a meeting with Nora Jones and ended up writing 90% of her album and
Wow.
Springsteen for the record of the year. I mean,
Wow.
just so. Just cool, like so.
Yeah.
Mad
Yeah.
respect, and like the fact is, I feel like it, it would have been really hard to make a substantial buck for me in the hip hop space because I didn't enjoy it. I don't love
Mm.
music. And so I
Yeah.
do believe that if you do find something, and I think
Mm.
you have in your world, you
Mm.
love people, you don't despise lawyers, like that this world allows you that 1-2 punch, that
Yeah.
ideally finding something where you do have the opportunity
Yeah.
to do something that you do love.
Yeah.
And so for me, I like my dad was a lawyer, non-marketed lawyer.
Mm.
I took that concept and built this law firm. He's now senior counsel.
Mm.
He's 86 years old, still practicing everyday trust and estates, has his own practice in New York. He's senior counsel to our firm and helps our trust and estates guys with war stories and the idea that I liked the space, but I didn't want to be a trust and estates lawyer that was doing documents all day. If you
Mhm.
find what you do love, which is like, I get along pretty well with lawyers. They're educated. They're
Yeah.
not, they are interesting people with interesting stories
Yes.
that are really, doing neat stuff. I
Yeah.
was able to say, okay, I love the business side. I love the marketing side. Let me take that drive and determination and play in this sandbox.
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
this point, we acquired this guy Bill, who had been at Page One Solutions, who was a legacy player in the digital space. And when he came over, his company got bought by a SaaS company, and he said, "You know what? I really don't want to be in the SaaS world. I really want to be what you're doing." And we sort of gave him a pad where he created a medical division that he sort of oversees and runs, and that's
Mm.
awesome. But I got to tell you, I got on the phone calls with the doctors when he first started in this medical division, MedShark Digital, and I was like, I looked at it and I'm like, I was not connecting with the people, just like I couldn't connect with the millennials. I'm
Ah.
like, I'm like, hey, I think I'm pretty badass. I built these two businesses. Don't you want to listen to me? Like, they were like, no, we like Bill. Bill
Oh.
speaks our language. I don't speak doctor language. I speak
Yeah.
their language because I get it. I get what's inside. I've been there. And
Yeah.
for me,
Oh, that's
it's like,
fascinating.
that's been, I think, the 1-2 punch where you say, hey, what are you going to do next? Like, yes, you could do anything. I see 1,000 things in need. The intake space needs a ton of need. Recruiting takes there are all these areas that have tremendous need. But if it's not your passion play, is it going to work? Or could you find something that is your passion play within it
Hmm.
that allows you to give, because if you don't have that excitement, like I had the excitement of digital, but not for rap. But if you find that 1-2 punch where you really love what you're doing and you want to sort of be the evangelist for it, it makes it that much more interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. It definitely strikes me as we've talked, especially talking about the early days of you in business. You followed your nose. You've kept like you find an interest in something, you see an opportunity, and you go play with it and you get in there. And then, for whatever reason, one thing's shut down, whether you decided to or whether it happened to you, and then you move on to the next. And it seems like you've done a really good job of finding and playing on your interests at the intersection of opportunity and capitalizing on that to the best of your ability. And yeah, that's a trait that seems like uh lends it's a good ingredient for a recipe of success, for sure. That's pretty cool to hear. um what would you say, I mean, we're kind of coming coming towards the end of the interview. As you look back on your entire journey, like from really young Seth all the way till right now, which I still think you're really young, so that didn't mean that you weren't young. um, what are like one of the top 1 or 2 lessons learned that come to mind that now you've got under your belt, but you had to learn them?
Well, my kids would agree on the not young, which is tough because I still think of myself as that 21-year-old.
Totally.
And to that point, I used to be able to solve any problem. If there was a personality conflict or somebody was unhappy, I could take them to Starbucks and correct it. If somebody was on the fence of being hired, I could pick up the phone and close the deal.
What do you
And
mean used to be
used
able
to,
to?
meaning I can't connect with that
Oh,
21 to 30-year-old population.
okay.
So meaning I may not think I'm old, but that is the definition of not being young, is that I no longer have that direct connection where I was like, if somebody's on the fence of choosing 2 places, I never lost them. And now I can't, now I don't have that same competitive advantage.
That's
But
interesting.
I would say the thing that I said before, that nothing's easy. If you think like the internalizing that it's going to be tough, you're going to have pivots, you have to put your head down and fight, but knowing that you need to have your head up enough so that are you running to a brick wall over and over again, or is there a wave coming? Like there's now non-attorney ownership of firms, and you have 3 years left. Are you the limo driver as Uber was being invented? So I think nothing is easy. Fight hard and know that whatever you're building is not lost. I don't regret the 18 months that I spent tracking down Chuck D in order to get content that never ended up happening.
Why don't you regret it? Is it because, I mean, I agree that you shouldn't, but is it because it's a link in your chain? Like it's
a link in your chain, and it's the skill set of making something from nothing.
Yes.
And that, let's say you're sitting in a market and you're like, hey, my referrals aren't that good. We have a guy in the DC market who started around the time we did, and he didn't go digital. He has a website. He blogged back in the day, but his MO was, I believe, 3 lunches a week with dessert. I call it the dessert theorem. And I remember having lunch with him. He took me out to lunch toward the middle of his journey, and we had our lunch at his place where the waiters noticed, the owner knew us, and it was like, oh, it's time to go back to work. No, we're having dessert. And it was amazing. That dessert, we accomplished more bonding during that time than the rest of the meal combined. And it's like figuring out how to build your tribe. There are people like John Fisher who wrote a book and created a mastermind and created their circle. There's no one way to do it, but that when you see that it can be done starting with nothing. Jay and I on our show the other day, we debated Gary Vee. He's like, well, he started with $1 million business. I'm like, no, he took something that was a store and revolutionized wine sales online. And he showed every day you can go to a flea market if you have nothing. And you can turn enough to start your business and get it launched. That's what I'm saying. So I feel like there are so much opportunity out there. My cold phone call through a mentor to say, hey, I want to be part of something that was going on, has turned into a lifelong business mentorship and friendship that has been a stabilizing part of my firm. Take shots, not just with referral sources, but mentors, people upstream from you that you don't know what, it's not like you're looking for something, because the truth is, on another side topic, that in general, your core group is going to be your peers, and you're going to rise. Your referral partners are going to be your peers. Generally, I have seen it's not the older guys. You may get lucky and a benevolent person, but that's luck. Generally, those old guys have their referral sources, and that you're new to the party, and that if you grow and build with people, that to me is the best. So to me, it's continue to push, make the cold call, figure out things that can be outsourced so that you have the bandwidth to do that. Because if you do nothing but put your head down and practice law, you won't go to the next level, and you won't have that opportunity. So that to me is like, when I look at what's happened, it's getting enough bandwidth to take the cold lunch, to jump on a plane to an interesting conference, to take a Zoom, in today's world, to schedule a Zoom with somebody who's upstream, that it may take 3 times to get something scheduled. somebody who's really, really important upstream. It may be a phone call that's ignored. It may be an email. They may set up, never ask for something the next week, not the week. How about 3 weeks or 4 weeks out? Can you do it? It'll get bumped once, and continuing to stay with that perseverance, because some of those, what I'll call upstream contacts, can help make or break your career. At the same time, you spend your whole time looking at that, you probably won't have the fundamentals that when you are given an opportunity, that you have your machine in place to take advantage of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And then final question. You said nothing's easy, that whole truism, which I get that. And I think that's part of it's part of building something great, is going through all of the discomfort and just the hard stuff. So from your perspective, your angle, why do it? Because you could go have an easy life. Like anybody could go not do their own thing, not build their own things. And everybody's got a different answer. What's your answer for like, why do you do this?
Like, I love it. So it's been enjoyable. I knew what I liked. I didn't want to be, quote unquote, practicing law. By some people say I'm not a real lawyer. I'm a managing partner of a large firm. Like, is that lawyering? Who am I to say? Some people say yes. But the whole point is, I think that it's been a combination of figuring out what it is that you like doing, and to me, it's the excitement of building something, and sort of like that. There's nothing there, and then there's something there. Every once in a while, we do these roof deck parties for the law firm, and there were like 75, 80 people there. And they're like interns, like, oh, it's so good to me. And it's not, you're not doing it for that. You've built something. You're feeding 100 people's mouth. At this point, every morning I wake up and they're like, arguably 300 people that are eating because of something that I created. That's kind of cool. It's scary. I don't want to think about it too much. But my wife will tell you differently. She's like, the combination of ADHD and sort of impatience, you found a way to harness it and make a buck. Where my father-in-law was corporate his whole career. He was at basically a P&G subsidiary that got bought by P&G. He was a company man. He knows how to have a good conversation. He knows how to glad hand. He can work within that system. Not that there aren't bad bosses, but he worked his way up. And I think that, like, for me, I want to be building and growing, and that the corporate culture or structure is about lockstep and servicing and building the widget and getting promoted and staying within that structure. If you want, there's nothing wrong with it. You could probably make as much or more money doing that. I have just loved the idea that I've been able to, make my own path, and it's been successful. I mean, it's successful is a lot more fun than non-successful. So if it's not successful, you're like, man, this would have been cool. But I feel like I've been able to control my own destiny in a way that you wouldn't within a corporate culture.
Yeah. Yeah. This has been awesome. Thank you for joining me today. This has been incredible. It's so great to hear about your history. It's some of the crazy stories and some of the lessons that you've learned, how you think about things. I mean, this is all, it makes for great conversation. And I know that the listeners, there's takeaways for different people, different things. And so really thank you for giving your time.
My pleasure. I love it. Can't wait to see you in person sometime soon.
Yes, same. Send me the selfie you took at Max Law.
Very cool. I will.
Will you? All right. All right. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you again, Seth. Bye.